This week, we're doing something a little different.
We are bringing you the live edition of Canadaland Politics from Calgary,
where we dig into what the rest of the country gets so wrong about Alberta and what makes this place way more complex than the stereotypes. Although we are wearing cowboy hats, we are leaning into the stereotypes, but I don't know. It feels like it's no secret that the best suited people to talk about a place are the people who live in it, right?
That makes total sense. And I mean, being in Ottawa for so long now, I feel like it was good to get outside and touch some grass and put some faces to the names of people we read all about all the time.
Totally. So this episode, I take a bit of a backseat. I actually lean into my Toronto-centric ego, as in, I'm doing a bit here, guys. I'm not that dumb. And I let the cowboys and the cowgirls do the talking on this one.
And the cow thems.
And the cow thems, correct. Correct.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
All right, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? Okay, I'm going to be really annoying, but I hate when people do this. How is everybody doing tonight? That's better. We have three awesome panelists. Melanie Thomas is a professor in the Department of Political Science at U of C. She is a self-described nerd, and what makes people tick, she's very interested in what makes people tick when it comes to politics. She focuses on gender-based political inequality and the politics of energy transitions. Max Fawcett there in the middle, and if you listen to our show or our network quite a bit, you would know that he is a friend of the show, and he's been on many, many times. He's the lead columnist with Canada's National Observer. He won the 2023 National Newspaper Award for the Best Columnist, and also picked up a National Magazine Award in 2021 for his columns. And he's got a special focus on the Smith government here in Alberta. And sitting on the end over there is Erica Barutes. She is the department head of applied politics and public affairs at Macquarie College, former principal secretary to Danielle Smith, and the co-host of the Discourse podcast. Woo! So a little bit about me. I live in Ottawa right now. I am the reporter from there for Canadaland, but I am born and raised in Calgary, so this is like a really nice homecoming for me. Thank you. And I made a vow when I moved to Ottawa that I would push whatever newsroom I was in to cover Alberta more, because I feel like Alberta gets a really bad rap. And I feel like people just don't understand the intricacies of Alberta and the politics here. It's a really, really special place, and I cannot stand it when people from Toronto...
Here comes the money.
Young money.
Here we go. Money.
Listen up, you hicks. Tighten your belt buckles and grab your Stetson, cause the queen is here.
Yeah.
Straight out of the only city that actually matters, the Six, the Skyline, the greatest city in the world, your host and the queen of Toronto, Noor, Azrieh.
Thanks, everyone, for making it out on a Monday night. Y'all have really fun lives. I'm Noor. I host Canadaland's politics show, and I've been dying to come to Alberta. I bet no one's ever said that before. But for months now, Alberta keeps barging into my life, breaking into my life. It's been clogging my feeds, my headlines, and the conversations that we have on the Canadaland team. But here's how this works. I'm going to tell you what I've seen, heard, or assumed about Alberta, and Max, Melanie, and Erica are going to tell me whether I nailed it or if I should stick to talking about Drake and bike lanes. And the audience, you lovely people, you can set the record straight at the end, or You can do that out loud. I know y'all like to heckle around here. So let's get into it. Myth 1, Albertans are conservative hicks. Are Albertans super conservatives? Do they wake up, pray to Preston Manning, and have a pipeline tattoo?
Can I just ask in terms of ground rules, are we allowed to swear?
Of
There's a child here.
course.
There's a child here, though. I just remembered that.
Oh.
So maybe I'll keep it on the
Keep it
polite
on the
side.
down low,
Okay,
but
all right.
Like if it happens.
if it happens, it happens.
So can I just start by saying, I don't think Torontonians should be talking any poop when it comes to politics in this province or politics in general. Obviously, the federal election results paint one story about Alberta, and a lot of that is a reflection of the first past the post system we have, and a few other factors. But at the provincial level, your last 3 provincial elections in Ontario have been complete destruction for the Conservatives. The Progressives have been nowhere. We had a very competitive provincial election in 2023. The NDP almost won. At the
didn't.
Almost. At the minute they should have. At the
is.
municipal level in our major cities, we have elected nothing but progressives for as long as I've lived here, since 2010. Toronto elected John Tory.
We don't like
Rob
to talk
Ford.
about that. Yep.
This is not a sterling track record of progressive bona fides. So I just feel like that there is this impression about Alberta that is created through the media, created because we have a premier who says a lot of interesting things. But the reality on the ground is, and I tell this to people whenever they ask me if they should move here, is it's actually a very reasonable place. It is progressive in a lot of ways you wouldn't expect. It's conservative, like we can get into the crazy stuff, but this image of Alberta as this backwards, Oklahoma with snow is just not the real thing.
Erica?
So I'm going to jump in. First off, Max and I do a lot of panels together, and we never agree. So I'm just going to point out that I agree. Just to start us off on a very, neutral ground. I drive a truck. I own a horse. I ride horses, and I'm moving out of Edmonton to move to an acreage. And I've never voted anything else but Conservative. So if this is what a hick looks like in Alberta, considering I check all those boxes, then maybe your myth is correct. But to your point, to Max's point, I remember, and I actually went to this, Jared Wesley, who works at the University of Alberta, did this huge survey of what is an Albertan. And regardless, it was all over, a huge study that he did, and I went to his final presentation in Edmonton, and we see ourselves as Farmer Joe. And so I do think it's hard for the rest of Canada to not think that we are that stereotype when we actually, even though we do put things about us being more progressive or especially in our urban centers, maybe not fitting that hick description. I think one of the interesting parts about the whole conversation is Toronto can think whatever it wants, I don't care. But that we actually, even as Albertans, do tend to view ourselves as that stereotype.
And it's the power of a stereotype. So I'm the person with the data who will bring the nerd bits.
We have facts too, we promise.
No, for sure. I also would like to point out that I think I'm the only one who is not just from a farm, but needed to give a land location many, many times over to renew my driver's license. There aren't very many of us, precisely because Alberta is also one of the most urbanized provinces in the country. The only thing that we can systematically find in terms of values and beliefs and various sorts of things is the emotional connection to the Conservative Party of Canada. But that's just not an Alberta thing. We call it the boot. It's like the BC interior, through the mountains, Alberta, most of Saskatchewan, southwest Manitoba. But otherwise, it's variations on a theme. I would say Albertans are actually immature, to be the provocateur. We are not fiscally conservative. To use the political science speak, it's the difference between symbolic and operational ideology. Symbolic is feelings, operational is ideas. Symbolically, people identify with the stereotype. They identify with wanting to be a certain kind of way, and then you ask them what they think and feel and want, and we want everything. We just don't want to pay for it. So if you're wondering why we're talking shit about renewables now from the provincial government or various sorts of things. It literally is the moment we give up the golden goose of oil and gas, we actually have to have an honest conversation about taxation and like how much it costs to pay for things, which can you imagine in Alberta where we actually had that conversation? Like, I'm not saying the way that
No
Jim
party
Prentice-
wants to talk PSD because of that reason.
It's political death, right? But like Jim Prentice wasn't wrong when he said,
well, we all need only look in the mirror, right? It's basically all of us have had the best of everything and have not had to pay for what it costs.
A lot of interesting things said there. The one thing I picked up on was that there are a lot of kind of progressive people in Calgary and Edmonton and Alberta. So why do you guys keep electing conservative governments? I don't get.
I do think that it's kind of a broad stroke that people say, because if you look at the progressive conservatives over 40 years, and I did work for Alison Redford too, so I know what it's like to work for a quote unquote red Tory or more of a liberal centrist. The party moved significantly towards the center to the point that there was no Alberta Party, there was no Liberal Party. There was simply a two-party system. And then obviously the Conservatives went the other way on the pendulum and we are where we are, but we have never got that middle ground. Like one of the biggest things I say is the biggest issue in Alberta is that we don't have that centrist party that actually might make it so that the conservative, you're picking between the right and the left. And we had a left recently. I think that being new to government, I'll give them some grace. It was their one term where they learned probably a lot that they would do differently, but they also did a lot of mistakes that really, I think people voted for the Conservatives not more for an alternative to what they currently had than maybe being a Conservative supporter. And so because we have this two-party system, I think it does make it so that your Conservatives in this equation, especially with our rural population and how our seat count is set, come out on top. But not to say that our history is shown, to your point, like I crap on this government and I worked for the premier because I think they're not fiscally conservative enough. And like a surplus, not for me, not my kind of conservative. And so to your point, I think the tightening your belt is really something Alberta didn't have to do for a really long time. And so it made it easy to be a conservative.
Max?
I want to make 2 points here. One is what we think of as conservative is changing really rapidly across the West. You know, you see Donald Trump and how he has basically taken a brand of politics that is more left-wing in a lot of ways than anything the Democrats have ever done in my lifetime, but it's still called conservative because the culture war issues are there. You see this in Alberta. You know, Danielle Smith had increased spending faster in 2 years than the NDP did in its entire 4-year term in government. She has created more crown corporations than I believe the NDP did when they were in government. Like she has done a lot of things that would have been classified as, socialist or left-wing, but because she wraps it in this culture war stuff, it still gets branded as conservative. So the meaning has just moved so far from where it was when Peter Lougheed was premier or even Ralph Klein that it almost doesn't mean the same thing anymore.
Okay, myth 2. Albertans are whiny and always think Ottawa is out to get them. Max, I've spoken with you about this before. My mind goes to equalization payments. Take it away.
Yeah, I feel like this is my biggest complaint, my hobby horse. I don't think progressive Albertans necessarily are whiners about this stuff, although I do see Naheed Nenshi and the NDP trading in some of the same arguments around Alberta getting a raw deal, Alberta's not getting its just desserts, yada, yada, yada. But it is just a fiction that has been written really successfully by conservative politicians, pundits, media organizations that we are treated so unfairly, right? That we, you look at the equalization debate about how we pay more into Confederation than any other province, and it's added up to $250 billion by now or whatever it is. They never talk about the fact that it was the federal government that bailed out the oil sands when they were still an experimental technology. In 1974, when Atlantic Richfield, one of the partners in Syncrude, wanted to walk away, it was the Pierre Trudeau government and the government of Ontario that saved the project. They never talk about the fact that it was the federal government of Jean Chrétien that basically changed the way oil sands projects were taxed that kicked off a 25-year boom that basically built the foundation for that prosperity. They never talk about that. They only talk about the part where Alberta's getting screwed. Alberta, it's not fair to you. Never mind the fact that the feds has built a pipeline. We can, that's a whole other thing.
Liberals.
I mean, it's this sort of Orwellian, bizarro world where conservatives blame liberals for ruining or harming Alberta. They want to kill our oil industry, even though production has soared under Liberal governments. And when you look at the facts, the worst governments for Alberta, for Alberta's interests, have consistently been conservative.
Erica, you're shaking in your boots.
Well, I'm just sitting here being like, okay, I'm never going to sell you a membership to my party. But I think that what it comes down to is that's where policy doesn't matter, because it's a feeling and an emotion. And so many people tie it to that. It's advantageous for them politically to fight Ottawa. And some do it quite well. I'd say I was the president of the United Conservative Party under Jason Kenney. Love him. Love Danielle Smith. Like, I like them both for different reasons. Danielle Smith has done it in a very different way, where she's played more to the heartstrings and Jason Kenney played more to the Constitution policy game. And I would argue, and I think we've got another myth about maybe the premier, but that she's doing it in a more approachable way to get Albertans on side, and has had deeper and more progress, I'd say, than any of her successors, whether on the left or the right.
We'll talk about Danielle Smith in a second, but I'll throw to you, Melanie.
If you're not taking feelings into account, you're not going to be able to accurately explain how folk are doing stuff. So politicians in Alberta wouldn't do this if it didn't pop in a fundraising email. Now, I don't have access to the fundraising emails, but I'm guessing that the reason why they keep going to the well is because it's effective. Because it's really easy to think, because Albertans really like all the expensive things but don't want to pay for any of them. Right now, when the price of oil varies by $1 a barrel, it swings the provincial budget by $800 million, which for me, just makes me want to sweat, right? And so instead of having the conversation about, hey, should we be doing our provincial finances like this? So much easier. So much easier to be kind of like, if these big baddies out east, I want to be like in Fredericton? No. But if Toronto wasn't that, then maybe things would be better. I don't know. Again, it's the feelings.
So I fully accept with great sadness that the feelings of people in Alberta do not care about the facts here. I do think it is worth just reiterating.
No one cares about
No,
facts.
but I just think it's worth reiterating when Melanie talks about the way our budget is tied so much to oil. The single biggest improvement in that leverage came as a result of TMX. The federal government built TMX. It shrunk the differential on, we're going to get really complicated on oil, but anyways, it put billions of dollars in the provincial coffers. The federal government did that. The evil federal government, right? These are all facts. I know that people don't care about them, but the thing that frustrates me is, I'm sure pushing the bad Ottawa button works politically. I know it does. But when folks like Jason Kenney, who is very smart, we said nice things about Jason off air. I'm going to say some mean things now. They started us down this road, and they're pushing us down this road where we are getting to the point where we are openly talking about separation. We are damaging our province's economy. We are making it difficult for people to raise capital here. There's already businesses that have said we're not investing because it's too uncertain. Jason Kenney started that ball rolling down the hill because he thought he could push the anger button and get away with it.
Erica, you wanted to say something?
Okay, yeah, I want to come back to kind of like the overall question, because people lead more into emotion than facts. But if you ask Albertans, most of us know what C48 is, or C48, C69, what the emissions cap means. And so those are, I think, where a lot of people tie their emotions to actual things that they see the federal government doing to impede the natural resources, which are under the jurisdiction of a province. Don't get me wrong, any provincial government will also remind you of that, because that's part of their communication of reinforcing why we don't like Ottawa, because they're not treating us fairly. I think it's totally fair for, especially, I'd say broader, the prairie provinces, to have frustration given the fact that we do have natural resources, and that wasn't really figured out in Confederation, right? When you're looking at Section 91, you weren't sitting there being like, well, some people might have more, or this formula we're going to develop, right? That's why, I mean, that's even why you see municipalities being run under provincial governments, because those weren't thought of back then. So there is, I think, a justification of not feeling like you're getting your fair share. And I think that's where maybe some of the whining comes from, because I think there is direct policy that people feel have impacted their lives or livelihoods. I think a lot of people, myself included, great that Rachel Notley and Justin Trudeau got TMX, but as a Canadian, that should have never happened. It was policies by the federal government, and this is my opinion, that by the federal government that required TMX and 3 other companies to pull out because it wasn't giving them investor confidence, nor was it a business case. So they had already built so much of it that it was like, well, damn, we don't agree with it, but it's already there, and we're gonna lose just as many billions in finishing it, which can create revenue, or we can just leave it and we have infrastructure. So I would say a lot of people in Alberta, and I can list all the places I've been that have a lot of people that feel like me, where you could see that connection being made, which I wouldn't use whiny, I wouldn't use immature to talk about Albertans, but I think there is probably an adjective that could explain maybe why we feel that way with Ottawa, and then politicians are doubling down on it. Whether you're Rachel Notley, who leveraged it, or Jason Kenney or Danielle Smith, they just have very different tactics and different bases and different motivation. I will say I don't appreciate saying that like Jason Kenney starts the anger train. People voted against Rachel Notley. Jason Kenney just happened to be the guy that put his name on that party. And I was a big part of that party, and I'll say people weren't voting necessarily for the UCP, they were voting against the NDP in that election. And so I don't think that you can say that the anger festered from Jason Kenney. I think also when we get into it, Jason Kenney on separation, he's come out publicly saying he hates it. He loves the monarch. He would never leave Canada. He is Canadian first, which is very different than what maybe we see as the tactic from the current premier, Danielle Smith, right? In their same party, but very different ways that they fight Ottawa, and very different ways that under Jason Kenney, this referendum would have never happened, and I would bet my life on it.
Thoughts?
Well, I mean, Dr. Frankenstein was horrified by the monster he created too. You know.
So am I Frankenstein?
No,
Like
Jason Kenney is Dr. Frankenstein here.
Oh, I don't even get a role in this?
And I mean, he discovered the consequences of his own action because his party members voted him out as the leader of his own party. So he saw that happen to him. It's now happening to the province, and it was because he made people really angry about Ottawa. He pointed their anger over things like the price of oil falling from over $100 a barrel to under $40 a barrel. It was not anything to do with the federal government. It was the Saudis. It was OPEC. It was a whole bunch of other things. And he saw that the pain that was creating, it was creating pain in Texas too, in North Dakota. And he said, it's not your fault. It's their fault. And that anger has metastasized, and it is a cancer on the body politic in this province right now.
Everyone take a deep breath and give him a round of applause. Let's go. Y'all are doing great. This is really exciting. I'm learning so much. Okay, I want to get to who I really want to talk about tonight. Danielle Smith. What's the deal with Danielle Smith, guys? Honestly, a very interesting politician. I've been following a lot of what she's doing in the past few days. There's been a lot. Why is Danielle Smith so popular?
Well, I was like, do you guys want to go first? I believe
please.
It's actually because, and I think Max actually talked about this, is, or maybe we were talking about this before, but Danielle Smith is far more approachable, I think, than a lot of conservatives and the conservative brand.
How so?
Well, I think she brings in her radio style approachability, whether you like the Alberta Next panel or not. She puts herself out there and talks to people and engages. It's a freaking nightmare when you're a staffer and she's like, I want to do this and I want to go do this and I want to talk to this person. This person gave me this idea. We should look into this. She really does consult with people, and I think it's her radio talk show background, which is a very different approach than Jason Kenney. And so I think that whether you agree with her politics or not. Like, I've been to the Alberta Next panel, and there was a lot of people there. I live in Edmonton, so go figure. It's probably more left than it was right in that room. Mm-hmm. But they said, we hate everything you're talking about, but we actually, and I was surprised by this, we appreciate that you're even creating an opportunity for this conversation and that you're hearing us and letting us yell at you if that's the case. And in many cases, it was completely inappropriate what speakers were saying. And she sat through it all. As Premier, you don't need to do that. And so I think that when she does things like that, it humanizes her. I think the fact that she crossed the floor, got her ass kicked, and is very humble, I think, about it, humanizes her. I think that the fact that she says a lot of things that people might not say in her role. I think she's very outspoken, and people appreciate that whether you agree with her or not. And I think regardless of if you vote for her, you sit there being like, she will relentlessly stand up for Alberta, or what she, like her version of, or what she thinks is best for Alberta. And so I do think, coming from the Conservatives, where a lot of time it is old white men, right? And she is a very different voice and perspective that I think makes it more welcoming than maybe what people would stereotypically think of the Conservative brand, which has had challenges in the last decade.
We evaluate leaders based on our perceptions of their character and their competence. And it's not done when you look at just them as individuals. It's done in comparison with the other leaders that are in the mix. And so this is why I had a deranged Muppet shock and talk in my class when Mark Carney announced, to my surprise, because I'm a nerd and I don't pay attention to these things, but I was like, depending on how that character and competence evaluation goes, you could see Liberal fortunes do exactly what they did. Because it's about who do you think, and like by character we mean, there's a reason why pollsters ask, who would you rather have a coffee or a beer with? Who do you think is a decent person? Who do you think cares about people like you? And competence is about whether or not you think that they're not an idiot. And so you need both, but people will always take the person they think is decent, who might be dumb, over the person who is very smart, who they might think is not a very good person. So somebody like Stephen Harper always had really cold character ratings. People, and like, he strikes me as a reserved man. Like, in many ways, it's not fair if you know the individual personally, but it's not the personal side that's being evaluated. It's how they're being presented in public and in comparison with each other. And so in this particular context, I agree, Danielle Smith is an outstanding retail politician. She makes people feel like they are heard. Even when she's saying things that they profoundly disagree with, there is a way that she talks that make people feel cared about, which will be doing things on those competence perceptions, on those character perceptions, rather.
Max, I want to ask you a question that has been on my mind, especially for the last few days.
Sure.
Danielle Smith has been getting along with Mark Carney in a way that I didn't anticipate or see coming.
I would say that my meeting with the Prime Minister was about as encouraging as any meeting I've had with the federal government in a long time. I think he really understands the issues that we put on the table, and we're working through how to address them.
I mean, she did sabotage Pierre Poilievre's campaign multiple times during the election, but I don't know, what was your reaction to seeing them be all buddy-buddy?
It was a little surprising. I had to check to make sure that it was not like a fake tweet or something.
Danielle Smith parody.
Because, like the federal government could cure cancer and she'd be like, took you long enough. It's just her operative mode. And to see her be so chummy with Mark Carney and use these really interesting words, she used together a lot, which is not a word she uses about Ottawa. She said it was like an extraordinarily productive meeting. I think she understands that she did really good business with a wounded Justin Trudeau. Like, that was a fantastic asset for her. Mark Carney's a different cat, and she cannot afford to be on the wrong side of him. If you look at his popularity ratings in Alberta, they are shockingly high for a federal Liberal Prime Minister. Melanie and Erica have said she is a gifted politician. I abhor almost everything that comes out of her mouth, but I admire the way it comes out of her mouth. Like, she is so good at politics. She makes people feel heard even when they disagree with her. I think anyone who has dreams of being a politician, and God help you, but go do open line radio for 5 years, right? Like Christy Clark did that in BC. She's done that. You've seen people in the States who have taken that talent. It makes you a better listener. And I think that is a rare skill in politics, is being able to actually listen to people and have them see that you're listening. So often politicians are just monologuing at the public. So, any other progressive politician with her track record of the things she's said and the things she's done would not be able to get near government. And yet she appears to be kind of almost unbeatable. I know I have a lot of progressive friends who think, oh, Naheed Nenshi is going to give her the business. I would not bet on that myself. I think if it comes down to a question of leadership between those two, she wins that going away. And it's not because she's smarter. It's not because she's more trustworthy. It's because of all the characteristics that Melanie listed out. She is someone that people would want to go for a beer with.
Who wants to have a beer with Danielle Smith? No?
She doesn't drink beer, sorry. She drinks wine. But no, if I could just jump in on the Mark Carney thing, and we're huge nerds that saw her tweet and dissected everything. There was almost a message to all of her different audiences about that. It's more time for maybe part of the base that's pushing back or wanting more deliverables from her. But there's a time where why I think she's a great politician is, even how she went into that last meeting, people were like, oh, she's listing her demands. Who does that? Most business people. And so you don't do it if you're a sport team. You don't say, here's my plays and here's what I'm going to do. She did it, and then she can take strategically that win maybe differently than, and she'll run with this win if there is an emission cap. She called it an emissions cap. So she's using the Liberal government language. She said things like very productive meeting. She played a video of them walking and laughing. I'm like, I don't even know what they were talking about, right? Being in meetings with her like that, where it's how did this come up? Because it was them collectively wanting this win. They both win. Frankly, if he keeps Alberta at bay, and that's one of his biggest challenges, is keeping the country united. It's far less than the issue or the challenge that Danielle Smith is facing. And so, they're both looking at it as politicians on what is in our best interest. And like you said, I'm never voting for Mark Carney, wouldn't, but I'll take him over Justin Trudeau any day. He is doing things that the Conservatives ran on. And so it's you can't be angry at some of this stuff. And I think Danielle Smith has realized that some of these policies he's doing, or what he's willing to do when he is your prime minister, is the best deal she's going to get and the best dynamic. So she'll take the win and pull away, I think, from the screaming and shouting that we've seen in the last 8 years.
I do think it's worth noting, and I do wonder when Pierre Poilievre is going to figure this part out, but if Danielle Smith wins and Mark Carney wins, he loses. Mm-hmm. And he has consistently been the biggest loser from her actions. Whether she did it on purpose or not, who can say? She torpedoed him in the election. And guess what? She was quite happy with the outcome because it was still a Liberal government. At some point, that friction is going to break out into the open the way it has, I think, with the Premier of Ontario and Pierre Poilievre. But she is Pierre Poilievre's biggest problem, not Mark Carney.
I would say I don't disagree with all of that. So look at us, we got two.
Amazing.
Bookend of the show. But I think that you're right. I think Pierre Poilievre's play is going to be one that you'll talk about in political science classes for some time, because he did, you say torpedo, and I do think she definitely in that first week of the campaign, I was like, shut up. Because it did cause problems, whether it was intended or not. Bringing it back to Alberta is how Naheed Nenshi plays this. Because when he ran, I was like, this is the best thing for the UCP. And it comes back to how he is as a leader. It had nothing to do with his popularity, but I was like, he comes off as arrogant, and he gives a vibe of I had this role as mayor, and he also didn't know how to run a caucus, which is very different politics than municipal. And so I think Danielle Smith's likability, bringing it back, or whatever this is, what's the deal with Danielle Smith? I don't think she has any competition right now.
Yeah,
so whether you like her or not, she might be here longer than you think.
Where has Naheed Nenshi been? I just feel like he's been MIA.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, anyone? Anyone in touch?
I don't want to twist the knife too much, even though I like it. But I don't understand how they haven't learned, this is the NDP, how they haven't learned the election, the lesson of the last election. I wrote a column in that election basically saying that the NDP has to have an economic message, right? They have to have a story to tell about this province that is optimistic, forward-looking, and uses the language of jobs, of economy, because that is always where progressives win. You look at Zoran Mamdani right now in New York, and New York's different than Alberta, obviously, but his message was one of affordability, of cost of living, of economic issues. It was not culture war issues. And I still don't hear an economic message out of the NDP. I don't hear a story about where they would take the province, if not doubling oil and gas production, which by the way is ridiculous and will never happen, but what's your alternative? Like, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna build this place to be better? All they talk about, and they did this with the previous leader, all they talk about is how bad the UCP is.
To your point earlier, I'm sure when they are talking about those things, they're racking up some fundraising dollars when they're saying stuff about some policies that the government, I'll use the transgender policies, and that's something that they find motivates their base, but it doesn't answer the average Albertan's question of how are you going to lead this province? And Alberta elections are won on the economy.
So to be the research downer, positive ads don't work. Everybody says they hate negative campaigning, but it's the thing that moves and swings. I do think all negative without at least a half-assed alternative for people to land on is a campaign error. So yeah, I agree on that. The last two provincial elections, I just happened to be abroad, so I would be getting the news 2 days later on a podcast and just being like, oh, okay, what's happening? Okay, so negative, when people say don't go negative, it's nonsense. Not positive thing to land on. People don't vote on issues. Every time I get a journalist saying, what are the issues in this election? I was just like, as many as there are voters, because when people say the single issue election, it was 1988, and it was because every party agreed to not talk about the Constitution. And Meech Lake, and you need to be old enough to remember Meech Lake, and the elder millennials and younger don't, right? But when they talk, that's the only reason that we had the single issue election was because there was a major existential issue where we'll just pretend that doesn't exist for the purposes of the election campaign. Yeah. The other thing is issue ownership, where it is if a party owns an issue, or party family. When we say party families, we mean clumps along various parts of the ideological spectrum. When they own an issue, they don't actually have to be competent at it. It's just a gift that they get. So you can't be a New Democrat and say jobs, 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 because no one will accept it. You could be a conservative and say jobs, 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 and people are like, oh yeah, okay, cool, right? And every party has issues that they own, and it varies provincially and federally because the Liberals are sitting in the middle, and we already talked a little bit about this. But it's one thing to say, and I agree, I'm not disagreeing that you don't craft an economic message, but it is not the same task. If you own the issue, it's much easier than if you don't. But also, I totally agree. Kind of if you're not going to offer people but why should I? Instead of saying why shouldn't I vote for them without but why should I vote for you? It's never going to work.
So can I just jump on one thing? I know I'll be quick, which I've never been before in my life. But so on the last election, I was running issues and we're doing the war room. The NDP released their budget, and I don't think we were going to it was a toss up at that point. What won the UCP the election is the corporate tax that the NDP introduced because they said, we'll also create jobs and do this. And then in the weeds, their math didn't add up and they had a 12% corporate tax increase. That's how the UCP got reelected. And so this is where it comes back to the economy, is that they were saying all these, not authentic to say jobs, 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 but then they really weren't going to do it. And that's where, and then we doubled down with attack ads because they work, and we went after that message, and that's all we talked about for the last 2 weeks. And that's how the UCP is the government.
It works through perceptions of competence in leader evaluations. And so if your math isn't math, people are going to think you're an idiot. And if you're also not nice on top of it, good luck to you, right?
Give him a round of applause, please.
All right, everybody, that is it for Canadaland Live in Alberta. Thank you so much for tuning in. And you know what you can always do on these YouTube videos?
You can like, you can comment, you can subscribe, you can hit the bell if you want to be notified of when we publish, which is regularly these days. So hit the bell.
And if you do that, we'll give you one good hat nod.
Yeehaw!
Yeehaw!